Particularly when we're doing projects that are funded with federal revenues, with federal support that are part of a federal infrastructure program, for instance, we should make sure that they are fully ADA compliant and work with the design groups to make sure that when standardized designs are adopted, that they are disability sensitive, that the ADA rules are at a minimum met, and with any luck, we do better than that.
With infrastructural sort of requirements, and I think that's something that society is starting to get its head around, and understanding that we're all, humans, and we all have equal right to access a building or a facility or an activity. And I think that's something that is not going to change overnight, but there's some really good positive movement, but there's still a long way to go.
So it's really very, very devastating to see how much climate change doesn't only bring about the primary effects that we see, those are the floods or the landslides or the droughts, but it also carries secondary effects. But that I'm talking about the problems that follow up in a community or in a family after they have experienced a climate disaster. And those are problems like having to struggle to get water and having to struggle to get food, some students having to drop out of school, some young girls having to be forced into early marriages because their parents expect a bride price, from the men that they're marrying them to.
Often we, perhaps just without thinking about it, people make judgments about people as soon as they meet them, and it's not right to judge a book by its cover, and so none of us should make assumptions about other people without getting to know them first. So there's no denying the fact that I have a very visible physical disability, and so people may jump to conclusions or assumptions right away when meeting me, but with disabilities, just like we need diversity in all walks of life, so that the federal workforce really more reflects the society that we all work for and we all represent. And so I definitely want to see those opportunities provided, because if you look at it, as far as we've gone with promoting the Americans with Disabilities Act and realizing that promise, the unemployment rate for people with disabilities is still far too high when you compare that to the national average. We say we employ people with disabilities that, there are a whole range of disabilities. Some are visible, others are not. And so it's not just about, employing people with visible disabilities. It's looking across the spectrum.
Brand and that line of clothing, that's an important moment. I think that's a big company recognizing that there is an important market that is unserved completely out there. That is people who are not, the classic model for whatever reason. Either they're using a wheelchair, or they have prosthetics, or they've had a stroke, any number of things that make it difficult to use clothing in the conventional way that we make clothing. And for them to recognize that and create a product line around that, my hat is off to them. I think that says a lot about where society is on disability and understanding what disability is. And really, that word disability, which is, a lot of people who are disabled don't like that word. Differently abled might be a better word, but I think people get comfortable with it. And that's all part of the, what I've been talking about, this idea of normalizing what is, abnormal after all, right? This is not something you see every day, but people shouldn't be focused on it. They shouldn't latch onto that as the defining element of my life. And I want them to understand that I am a person who's doing a job, who's meeting them to conduct an interview, who happens to be a one-armed person, not the one-armed reporter in that hierarchy, if that makes any sense.
We know that there's been a healthcare gap and disparity for people with disability and those without for a long time. There's also been, in disaster and emergency situations, people with disabilities are much more worstly affected than those without. Two examples are, you get thrown into challenging things at different points in your life, but we all have that capacity to get through it, even though it seems so dark.
Back to some of the beginning points we were discussing, and that is we need a well-organized disability community. In order to be able to have consistent engagement with government agencies or with nonprofit organizations, we need to have disabled people and organizations that have a clear idea of what the barriers are, what the solutions are. We need people who are resilient, in spite of the fact that the UN Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities now has 173 countries that have ratified it. Many of these governments really do not understand the depth of the discrimination and what they as governments need to do and how they need to be holding their government agencies and civil society responsible for learning about what discrimination is and the diversity both of disability and us as people. We're different like everybody else, but we need to be able to express those differences. And in many cases, the way to do that is by removing barriers that have precluded us from participating equally. Every individual should feel dignity and pride in who they are.
Every time we have seen a business employ a person with a disability, if they provide adequate training and some support for that person becomes one of their best employees. So I tell young people with disabilities, look, we need role models. There are not many role models in public office of persons with disabilities. So I tell them, you be the first wave. And if there was any overtures at all to persons with disabilities, it was usually in a patronizing atmosphere, pity, charity, that kind of thing, rather than seeing a person with a disability and saying, wait, it's not the disability that prohibits a person from having a full life, it's the barriers, it's the physical barriers, the attitudinal barriers that people have.
Did you like this video? If so, share it with your friends and be sure to follow us on social media. And if you want even more resources, be sure to sign up for our email updates on our website, traipsinglobal.com. Keep learning new perspectives, keep being inclusive because it will make the world a better place for you and for everyone else. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll catch you on another episode of the Traipsin Global on Wheels podcast hour.